project. So today I will talk you about the project Shared Wind, shared anchors for floating wind turbines, project developed by myself under the supervision of Luc Torel and Mathieu Blanc. I used to start with the acknowledgements for my presentation. Basically, this project is funded by the European Union with the partnerships with the NGI and the University of Southampton. So the context is among the different alternatives or solutions to secure floating wind turbines to the seabed. In this project, we worked with suction anchors and the concept of shared anchors. This one has the particularity, actually this anchor in this photo, of having three padies, and is one of the anchors used in the high wind dampened floating wind park. So here in detail, we can see on a schematic figure how this concept of shared anchors work and some data of the geometry of the anchors installed in high wind dampened floating wind park. In this project in particular, for 11 wind turbines, there were installed 19 suction anchors, meaning a ratio in anchors per wind turbine of 1.7 instead of 33 using just single anchors. Just for some context, I also like to show the principles, just roughly, on installation of suction anchors. The first part takes place by self-weight penetration, and a second part takes place by applying differential pressure or suction pressures until arriving at the installation depth of the anchor. Basically, some schematic figures. And I also brought a video also for the ones who are not familiar with how the order of magnitude of this kind of anchors and the operation necessary for installing this. So I just found this interesting video, and you can see also the order of magnitude of the anchors. This one is actually for an oil and gas application, but shows basically the principle. So you can see a view of the order of magnitude of the anchors installed in this example. See if we have some. Okay, some of the operations. So there are two vents open, as you can see, and also the logos which show that this technique comes basically from vast experience from the oil and gas industry. The first part, which takes place, which is self-weight penetration, it's just an observation in the moment in which the anchor arrives at the seabed, and the second part, which takes by applying suction pressures. So as you can see, it's a very complex operation. And then the last part in which basically the mooring line is being pulled. Okay. So now the idea is how to simulate this problem of shared anchors in the centrifuge. So basically we needed to develop a specific experimental setup. I brought another bit, but this one is not useful. And also this one, you are familiar with the scaling principles, but basically in the centrifuge, we test a model of a prototype in the enhanced gravity field of a geotechnical centrifuge, and the idea is to achieve stress and strain compatibility. I just put as reference a book about centrifuge modeling, in which you can see that in more detail. And now moving to the project was divided in several working packages. The first one was to determine load conditions and geometry of anchors and seabed characteristics. Basically, to include the concept of shared anchors was one part done at the NGI during a secondment I did there. Second part, which was most of the work I conducted in the project, was physical modeling using centrifuge testing. Doing also some numerical simulations, but this work was conducted at the University of Southampton. And at the end, join all the information we get and examine different geometry conditions, characteristics of shared anchors, and soil conditions. So in this presentation, I will focus on physical modeling, and basically it evolved at different levels of complexity. We started with simple monotonic load test. As you can see, we just applied just simple lateral load and pull load test just to test the initial setup. Then we started to move to do some monotonic cyclic load test, and we included the padite load. We increased the complexity. We moved to multi-directional load test. So it was necessary also to develop an anchor with 3 pad eyes. And in the last stage, we conducted multi-directional load test, in which we include cyclic load test, and we are out also to simulate time history loads. And one of the objectives is to develop a database of the experimental response of suction anchors to get benchmark data and conduct numerical simulations. The first part, so I think you are familiar with, is basically the reconstitution method. We use the space-wide cowling in a similar manner as Fernando actually presented. The methodology is similar. We conducted several sublayers. We started with cowling claim in a slurry condition. It's a water content of around 90% we got here. And as you can see, we're different stages of consolidation. And roughly all this process took around 1 month. And just to remember that the centrifuge experiments we conducted were at 75 G. This is an example of the typical profiles of undrained shear strength we measured in the centrifuge. And we added extra data by using a hand vane at 1 G. This hand vane test was conducted after stopping the centrifuge. And it's very interesting that there is a relatively good agreement between the measured in-flight TR test and the additional points we got with the hand vane, which I think is a very interesting alternative to get some backup data in case there is a problem with the TR. I think with the shear vane test, we can get also an idea of what is the undrained shear strength profile of the claim. So for the project, also we developed an anchor with 3 pad eyes. We did a trial test in which we actually got some failure of the pad eyes, but well, we arrived to a final design which worked for what we wanted to do. And as you can see, it's an anchor with 3 pad eyes, and you can observe here a view how the anchor was installed in the centrifuge. The installation was conducted at 1 G, basically by jacking the anchors. Also to reduce the complexity, it's possible to install it in flight by suction, but we just wanted to reduce the complexity of these operations, even if in the lab we have this expertise. And in terms of prototype dimensions, the anchors were 4.5 meters diameter and 15 meters length. So we try to keep as similar dimensions as those installed in high wind dampened floating wind park. And now this is a view of the experimental setup we developed. It's a view in which we have 3 actuators which are in charge of applying the multidirectional load. So if we remove the model container, we have the cowling claim and a detail how the 3 multi lines arrive to the anchor. The model was instrumented with different types of sensors and for pressure transducers, and obviously the load cells to monitor the load supplies to the anchor. Okay, this is a view, an sample of one centrifuge experiment in which we applied simultaneously 2 monotonic loads, basically by 2 Mori lines, load unload at different scales. And we ended with at the end with a monotonic load test, just to compare with the baseline monotonic capacity. So we test 3 anchors. The first one basically is just a monotonic load test, and the Mori line is inclined 45 degrees. So this is basically our baseline. And in the other 2 cases, we started to apply these alternated monotonic pulse for this particular experiment. And then after doing these cycles, we do another monotonic pull, basically to compare with this baseline capacity. You can observe here also in detail the type of instrumentation we installed, and we have also several measurement points for pressures. We installed one at the top of the anchor, one at the base, and one at what we call 1 diameter below the base of the anchor. This is some typical data, just try to simplify. And this is an experiment in which 2 Mori lines apply simultaneously monotonic pulse. As you can see here, we start with this pair. Then we alternate to this one, and then to this other pair. So as you can see, we increase the amplitude of these couples of loads, as you can observe here. And we end up with applying just a single monotonic pool just to compare with the baseline monotonic capacity. You can observe here also a typical monitoring of the excess pore pressures at the the monitoring points, and also vertical displacements. We have an auxiliary element. I don't know if we can see here. Yes, we have like a plate at the top where we can monitor additionally vertical displacement, and we can infer also rotations. So this is an extension element we added, which was designed to be lightweight. Anyway, it can add some extra weight to the anchor, but we try to optimize as best as possible. Also here, just to highlight, this is normalized by the monotonic capacity. So basically for this type of anchors in a monotonic pool, with a dome applied at 45 degrees, we got a capacity of around 4 meganewtons. So that's why we have some normalized applied forces larger than 1, because when we apply the two loads at the same time, it's like we are applying a load with a larger inclination. So for this set of experiments, everything is summarized in the form of a failure envelope. And basically this point corresponds to a monotonic pool at 45 degrees, our baseline case. This case considers the application of the two simultaneous loads, basically. So it means that the resultant load has a larger inclination. In this case, is 63 degrees. And it was calculated a theoretical failure envelope, basically doing some simulations with one in-house software used at the NGI, and then just an expression, actually, someone from the UWA who developed this expression to build this failure envelope. And we observed also that after doing this set of monotonic pools alternated, actually there's a reduction in the capacity of the anchor when doing the single just line monotonic pool. And we observed the order of magnitude in which it took place, this reduction in the capacity of the anchor. Basically, it summarizes everything. And this test we did different type of storm loads. And this one, basically, we applied very, very large loads to see what happened, basically collapsing to breaking. It was very interesting. And basically, to summarize, we developed an experimental setup for monotonic load, cyclic load, multidirectional load on suction anchors. We developed a database for pressures, forces, displacements, in this kind of response that we can compare them with numerical simulations. And in progress, we have also done some numerical models. In particular, I have done some analysis for piles on their multidirectional load in clay. And basically, just for further information, I have a data repository where I expect to publish all the results for someone who wants to reutilize this data, and the project website. And that's all.
Merci, Christian. Is there any question for Christian? Maria.